Welcome to Musings and Modalities. I'm your host, Tristen Stawicki. Think of me as your pragmatic shaman bestie. Join in with other high-vibe, lovely people as I unravel spiritual ideas to help create change and growth in your life. I cover a variety of spiritual topics, sharing knowledge to meet you wherever you are in your journey. As a shaman, astrologer, and human design reader, I help you understand how to make informed decisions and incorporate different modalities using discernment in your own intuition. Today, you will gain powerful shamanic healing tools you can use to incorporate spiritual practices in non-traditional ways. Whether you're just beginning or need a knowledgeable best friend with the next phase of your journey, I'm here to help. Stay tuned. Musings and Modalities starts now. Everyone, and welcome to Musings and Modalities. I'm Tristen Stawicki, your pragmatic shaman bestie, and for the next 30 minutes, we'll be diving into the topic of debunking the spiritual journey. Now, for those of us that aren't jet setting to other countries, or maybe we aren't radically changing our life, what does the spiritual journey look like for us? You might ask yourself, will my life look unrecognizable overnight? We see this portrayal in books and media that really show all the extremes of the journey without a lot of the daily nuance, and how this journey kind of unfolds for the rest of us, maybe that don't have that same experience or that aren't living glamorous lives. It could look a little different. So in this episode, I'll share kind of my take about the spiritual journey and the understated nature of change. So we've heard a lot in movies about eating and traveling and praying and kind of that being the core theme of a spiritual journey. And we see people on social media, wearing things like goddess clothing and reclaiming their femininity. And there's all kinds of expressions of the spiritual journey. And for many of them, I don't really relate to their experience. So I wanted to share kind of some of the details to help debunk common misconceptions about the spiritual journey and where you are on your own path. I really find it helpful to think of this as kind of the plot of a book. So if you think about your favorite book, there are probably highs and lows for the main character. There's growth and change, but at the same time, there are elements of the character that's fundamentally the same, right? So perhaps they have the same values they started with. Maybe they've just embraced them more, or they're just kind of unlearning ways that they kind of stepped away from themselves in certain cases. And so much of the spiritual journey is actually getting crystal clear on your values, things like honesty, integrity, curiosity, creativity is incredibly important, and removing all of the stuff that keeps you from embodying those values each and every day. And so what's the stuff, right? So that stuff is a combination of physical items. It could be clutter. It could be old, ill-fitting clothing. It could be like physically releasing things that no longer represent the person you are. And these are things that take up physical and mental space that essentially stops the flow of energy as you step into who you can be and the highest versions of yourself. This can also look like guilt gifts, right? So those things that someone gave you that you look at and you're like, oh, that's not really me. They don't really enrich my life. Yet you keep it. You keep it out of guilt. You keep it out of obligation in your home. For me, I love books. And so I have books literally in every room of my house. And I have to routinely kind of go through them because I have to look at like what books do I have that maybe don't resonate with me. Maybe I can't get through them. Maybe they helped me in a specific time and I'm so grateful for them, but they aren't really necessary for where I'm trying to go. And so I love to donate my books. I love them to give them to someone else who might need them. So I invite you to do the same. And there are a lot of other ways of kind of moving on and moving through your journey, right? So there's release work. And to talk about that a little bit, it could look like working through trauma. It could look like working through past life experiences. Maybe there were traumatic events or illnesses or deaths that had happened either in this life or previous ones, but you don't want to hold on to that energy at any point in your body, because it could really create energy stagnancy, right? And so energetic stagnancy can result in physical symptoms. For me, when I start to feel disconnected or when I start to feel odd sensations, especially in my hips and shoulders, there's a lot of tightness. I have to go and have body work done and energetic work done on a daily, or not on a daily, way too much, on a regular basis, I wish, to connect the flow and energy, right? This could be a combination of therapy or journaling or energy work or massages. All of that could kind of fall into the bucket of release work. And I really like having a combination of tools that I'm using, as I don't want to put too much pressure just on one thing, just on one tool. So I actually did 4 years of EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is why I use the acronym because that's a mouthful. And I did that on a weekly basis. And this type of therapy, if you aren't familiar with it, it uses eye movements to reprocess traumatic experiences and really works to reprogram your brain and rewire your brain, essentially. This is a very intense form of therapy, right? And it's so incredibly profound. There was so much coming through when I was going through those sessions that I actually found pairing acupuncture and pairing energy work with it helped me release pretty much everything that was coming up in my energetic and physical body, as well as my mind. And so when I pair tools, and this is something I've done, throughout the last decade plus, I found it really speeds up the healing process for me. Sometimes when we only have like one outlet or one tool, it can feel like we're putting all of our expectations on it, or we expect it to immediately heal us, or for that one thing to have a profound change. And it absolutely can, but it also is a lot of pressure to put on one thing. So the combination of things kind of really helps, and it just helps my body and energetically overall. And then you could also have a release of everyday things outside of kind of the physical stuff. So much of the media I used to love, like history documentaries, like kind of graphic fantasy shows, shows that have any violence or gore films. I really can't enjoy it all anymore. So I don't get me wrong, I still love absolutely trash reality TV shows. Like I still can watch, pretty much hot garbage in some ways and watch romantic comedies. But I found for some of the more like graphic shows, I really do struggle with energetically, or I start to hold on to it in my body, which you obviously don't want. And the message here isn't at all that the media is bad or not to watch specific things. It's really an invitation to notice how your body feels and if there are things your body doesn't enjoy experiencing anymore, thinking how you can support it by either not watching those things or maybe having a conversation with your body that, hey, this is a show I really want to watch or a movie I really want to watch. How can I best support you through the next few hours? I've read and listened to so many books and interviews about others' paths to enlightenment and their journey. And most of the time, it seems pretty boring and bland, to be honest. Many of the themes are like, okay, you can't drink alcohol, you can't have caffeine, you have to meditate for hours every day, you have to go to sleep early. And honestly, for a long time, it was like, why be alive then? Like, and absolutely no um, pure love to everyone that can embody all of those elements of those lifestyles. Like, wow, so impressed. But none of that was really interesting to me or what I wanted my life to look like. And the idea of that style of life seemed really unattainable and really extreme. So I really want spiritual enlightenment, which I see as the end of the spiritual journey, right? It's the ultimate goal. And I want to go to concerts and I want to stay out late with my friends, and I want to have beautiful, fulfilling, and enriching experiences. And so my version of spiritual enlightenment is experiencing the deepest level of contentment and joy and impact possible. The depiction of enlightenment seems so isolating and lonely, when I hear kind of those extreme examples. Where's the humor? Where's the joys of being human? So for me, that is only one version of what the spiritual journey can look like, and that's for someone who thrives on routine and really needs a lack of distraction. I live in flow, and I see my spiritual journey as a version of organized chaos that goes in a million different directions, yet when zoomed out makes sense in a bizarre and awe-inspiring way. Manifestation and magnetizing beautiful and luxury items and things into your life is a really common way that people dive into their spiritual journey. Now, the start of the cycle for the spiritual journey is one of loss and release. And that could be job loss, that could be a change in home environment. This change could be external or internal. Even if it's releasing contentment, that's kind of a more gentle change, but still a change. And then you start to yearn, you start to want more. And the yearning stage is where you can start dreaming and thinking of what your life could be. And this could look like, you're having your basic needs met, or you want a range of like a huge home, full walk-in closets, everything you can think of, right? Those are kind of the two extremes, and most people fall somewhere in the middle. And we need the pieces of the journey, right? We need to know that there is removing, there is updating, there is dreaming, but it can be easy to get lost in the feeling that you were in. So I found it really helpful to bring in a tool like the medicine wheel as a touch point and as a guiding principle so I can gauge where I am and where I'm going in the journey. So to further break this down, we can use the four cardinal directions. We can use the medicine wheel to see the overall cycle of the spiritual journey. Starting in the south, we can review what past events, wounds, and triggers that we're holding on to. Is it in this life? Is it in past lives? Is it both? And that's where we can bring in therapy and energy healers, and we can start the reflection process. And in the West, we can look at our current life and the friends and relationships that surround us. Who makes up our community? And should they be allowed in my circle still? Do I feel supported with my common needs from the folks I allow access to my energy? If not, how can I change that? And in the North, it's really time to reflect on your purpose and your passion. How are you showing up in this lifetime, and what changes can you make to embody your creativity, your gifts, and your soul's purpose more? I love to look at my daily rituals and habits and make sure they're supporting me when I'm working in the North. And then in the East, we see the unfolding of our destiny and how we can step into the next phase of our life. So, from media portrayals, kind of going back to some opening topics I talked about, the focus seems to be about releasing and manifesting, which is super helpful and is incredibly important in this process. But it's not the whole story. We need almost a place to land in between those two extremes that act as a liminal space where we can do some releasing and some manifesting, but really they're action focused on not just doing deep healing or dreaming. It's really about holding higher vibrations. And that can be tiring, right? Trauma work is tiring. And so we need these landing pads. We need these places in the four directions where we can hold a slightly higher vibration, where we can review what is and isn't serving us on a daily basis, and then move on from there. So I'm finding really what's missing from this portrayal is the experience of the changes in the mundane, right? The daily habits and rituals are really what build to the next level. When I look back in my life so far, I see all the little steps that it took to get here. It's the seemingly small choices, like what to consume and how I spend my time and with whom, that have had the greatest impact on my life. Because there are so many topics in the spiritual journey, there's a couple of side items I wanted to touch on in the conversation today. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the ability to quantum leap, because it is an incredibly um, interesting topic that has a lot of misconceptions about it as well. And so the idea of quantum leaping or quantum jumping is ultimately the belief that you can jump into a higher state timeline. You have the ability to shift your reality in a dramatic way. And this idea is rooted in the belief that there are multiple timelines of various energetic frequencies available to you. And through spiritual growth, through manifestation, through belief in the universe, you can jump into the higher or highest available timeline, which is a massive shift from your current reality. And this effort bypasses kind of the more gradual transformation and almost has the same quality to it of like a movie montage, right? Where you're dropped in after the character has done all the tedious stuff to create change. And what's so cool about quantum leaping is this is an actual scientific term to describe electrons and their move from one energy state to another by bypassing the other intermediary states. So to bring this home and not get too sciencey, it's kind of like being at the bottom of a mountain and you have all your supplies. You've trained for this hike. You've envisioned yourself at the top of the mountain, seeing a beautiful view. You're smelling the air. You're really like touching like all the tangible touch points. Like you can see it, feel it, smell it, all of those things. And in a blink of an eye, you're at the top of the mountain and you didn't have to do any of the hike, right? You just kind of flew right through that. You didn't have to live that experience. It's a destination to destination move. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how I quantum leap, and I wouldn't expect a quantum leap for every spiritual journey cycle, Right. So if we're working through the medicine wheel, I would say on average, I probably experience a major quantum leap, maybe every 3 or 4 cycles that I go through. And so much of this is going to be mundane. It's going to be journaling. It's going to be affirmations where you claim the reality you want to jump into. It's holding the highest vibration in your daily life for as long as possible throughout the day. So you can just feel like that is, like a second skin. It feels like you've already been in that environment. The ability to really engage all the senses, to really have clarity, to emotionally connect and have consistency allows you to kind of jump into that higher timeline. So outside of kind of those high level things, including, expressive dance, which I found really helpful, meditation, visualization, I always want to highlight being in nature because it's something I don't think any of us get enough of, right? And waking with the sun and sitting with it each evening is such a beautiful way to experience that. And in shamanism, this is actually called the daykeeper rite, which is rooted in the belief that in order to set or rise, the sun needs keepers of the rites to acknowledge its journey and its work each day. And so I invite you for the next 30 days to choose either morning or evening to sit with the sun, to reflect on the upcoming day and the day you just experienced, and kind of express gratitude for the energy and beauty that the sun freely gives us. And it's an invitation to sit with the highest level frequencies that you can imagine, to envision the highest level timeline you want to jump into. Now, if you've had the amazing and profound experience of quantum leaping, it's incredibly cool. I'm so grateful for it, but you may have experienced something of a backlash, right? And so I wanted to talk briefly about that because there could be a period of backlash after your quantum leap where you've just jumped into this higher vibration, you're in this higher energy timeline, you're like, I've made it. And just holding on to that energy and getting used to that space can feel really hard. There might even be immediate tests from the universe to make sure you fully embody and embrace this new reality. There could also be a period of stagnation, right? Of several months, even of 6 months. I wouldn't say a full year, I would say 6 to 8 months of where you feel like you've plateaued as the rest of you kind of catches up to this new timeline. And all of this is normal and is absolutely something I've experienced. The spiritual journey isn't just about release work. It's not about any one thing. And so I want to discuss gifts and how they're incorporated in the spiritual journey. We love giving gifts. We love, kind of the experience of stepping into who we're meant to be and using that. And with so many people getting stuck in the shadow and getting stuck in the release, they lose sight of the beauty and joy of this work. When I look back at my life and I see places where I have been in jobs that were soul crushing, and I've been in places where the energy just seems to expand to every facet of my life. Um, I can also acknowledge where, for myself and for others, spiritual work can almost be addicting in a way, where you start to analyze yourself or even others on, what you should find and what you need to heal and what triggers there are. And we don't want to stay in that energy. And we don't want the phase of the medicine wheel of that cycle to be longer than we need to be. So I want you to feel really comfortable moving on from release work and allowing yourself to stay in that higher vibrational energy, because I've actually found that's the hardest part, is holding on to those new high vibrations. And you really want to be comfortable in that and embracing the shift and changes that have happened. So when you work to embrace your gifts, I am not talking necessarily about, a training you've gone to or an attunement you have or anything like that. I'm talking gifts that can be literally anything. And so I'm going to name a few ways that's shown up for me. Using my voice. And the reason why I wanted to do these two gifts is they don't cost anything. They're innate within me, and there's something that I worked to get back to. And so this podcast is a medium through which I use my gift, right? I have an incredible platform where I get to share what I've learned. I get to use my voice for a global stage and give back to my community. And this is such a blessing. And it's also an opportunity for me to further reprogram from all the times I silenced myself, all the times I stayed quiet and small to not cause discomfort in others. Writing is such a gift and a joy. There's a reason that musings is the first word in my business and it's not modalities. I see the world through words. That's my lens. And so often I stifled that urge to write. I thought the term writer was for other people, people that had talent or education or something I so obviously didn't have, right? And that's such a load of crap. There's so many stories we tell ourselves, especially about our gifts, which is why I use these two examples, where we downplay or we act demure, we block out all of our ability to receive. And gifts, these gifts, right? Using your voice, writing, creativity, things that are innately you are really abilities that transcend all of the noise. They're not new cars or new shoes or getting a new job. That's all other. So I wanted to make sure that was, really clear as we talk through this process. Now for my BFFs only tip. So feeling isolated is completely normal at different phases of your life and in the spiritual journey. And if I find myself feeling isolated, I try to do three things. The first is to acknowledge the growth that the people closest to me in my life have experienced in the last few months, in the last year, and in the past few years. I really try to look at them with fresh eyes and not keep a past version of them in my mind. And this really helps me see the similarities where we share or even can show me how I've helped them. Perhaps they took a course on Reiki, and several years ago they weren't even interested in any energy work at all, or they've made, significant changes to spend more time away from work and are seeking a deeper connection with the cosmos and with nature. And by recognizing their growth, I can acknowledge my own, right? This can really help me level set and remove all the pressure and experiences I put on myself. This is an opportunity to also call in new folks. What are the friendships and relationships I want to manifest and bring into my circle? Recently I realized I don't have enough crone energy in my life. I don't have that maternal kind of wise woman energy that comes from someone that has seen and done it all. And I'd love to have that. So I'm looking into how I can embody more of that energy, how I can step into more of being a wise woman for the people in my life with the hope that she'll come into mine. And by recognizing my growth, my circle's growth, and calling in new relationships and new levels, I find the feeling of isolation goes away pretty quickly. So, going back to the spiritual journey, I wanted to share a recent story where it's kind of a mini example, honestly, of this experience to wrap up this topic. So, I went to Scotland in April and I had an incredible, phenomenal time. Most of the time was not spent in the cities, it was actually spent in the Highlands. And we had a 1 day kind of trip where we traveled from Inverness to the Isle of Skye. And the ferry pools were kind of the last major item on my itinerary, and the highlight of the plan for most of us. And when the bus of about 20 of us pulled up to the ferry pools, the bus driver immediately set the expectation with the following, which was the pools will look nothing like you've seen on Google. Okay, great. Awesome. All images you've seen of the ferry pools that are green and lush are completely altered and faked. Okay. You have 90 minutes here. Not a lot of time, right? It will take you about 30 minutes if you hustle to see the pools and about the same to come back down. And when you hit mud that continues for miles, you know you've gone too far, right? So already kind of a rocky start where we're like, oh, okay, this is not at all like maybe what I had envisioned. Um, and what was hard about that is this was the tour I was most like the part of the tour I was most excited about. So it was a little bit deflating to hear like any idea of what you thought this experience is going to be is wrong, like right off the bat. We didn't even get to like put our eyes on the land, the scenery or anything before we heard that. There's also a hike uphill I needed to sprint through. And it was April in Scotland, right? It's gray and rainy. And so I was dressed appropriately. I had hiking boots, so I was able to start off on a brisk pace. But very quickly, I realized there aren't any signs at the hike at all, right? It wasn't clear how many pools would be seen on the way or if the pools were just at the top of the hike. So I was really like, there was a lot of nerves and excitement. And, I was also a little hesitant now because I was like, okay, what is this going to turn out to be? So going through the hike, I'm kind of pausing here or there to appreciate the beauty and the energy of the land. There are a few sections I went out on a small path, I took a few photos, and then came back to the main walk. And for the most part, the pools aren't really accessible, right? Where you can wade in them or just walk to them. There's a lot of rocks and elevation that makes even touching the water a challenge. But I kept walking. I would see flashes of color from jackets in the higher elevations, and I was just holding on to the hope that the view would be worth it, right? And there was a certain point where the jackets that I had seen earlier, the colors were really bright and kind of obvious that I hadn't seen come back down. And I was worried we were honestly going to run out of time, that I wouldn't get to see the poles. And so I went faster and faster, trudging, over slippery rocks and crossing small streams. And, after a bit, it was really interesting where we walked and we walked, and there was this beautiful spot about a quarter of a mile before it turned muddy, and it felt like this was it. Like this was the culmination of the experience. And so I continued on beyond that, and it got just muddier and muddier, right? And so the group that I was with, we all kind of collectively decided to eventually turn back. And then we started to run into people on the way back that were like, asking what's up ahead, is the view worth it? All of the questions that were such a great reflection of the spiritual journey. And this was such a perfect metaphor for the spiritual experience overall, right? Because there were, of the 20 of us that were on the bus, there were people who went to the first few pools that were visible kind of from the beginning of the hike and then just decided to hang out there and not move on. There was the people that needed kind of continued reassurance of any reward before they continued. And then there were those who did the work, who hiked, who followed their own gut and their own knowing. And what I was most struck by this experience was the lack of payoff, right? And don't get me wrong, this was an incredible experience and the scenery is beautiful and lovely, but there was no clear spot that was the reward. There wasn't kind of a moment in the journey that I was like, oh, this is it, right? This is what I was working for. This is why I was hiked and sweaty and all of the things. It was really more subtle experience that was profound without any dramatics. It just was. And so I share this story to acknowledge, just like, the altered photos of the fairy pools, what we've seen in the media for spiritual experiences isn't the reality, or it at least doesn't account for the full spectrum of the spiritual journey experience. And so I really went through a mini medicine wheel for this journey. For the South, I had to release my expectations of this beautiful, lush greenery or the sunny day that, I had hoped would happen, but definitely didn't. For the West, I had to let go of the idea of who I thought I was when I experienced this, and who I thought I would experience this with because several folks I envisioned doing that kind of opted out of the full hike. And for the North, I was grateful for all of the workouts and trainings I'd done to set me up for success. I embraced using my intuition to guide me and what I needed to experience this journey. I was so proud of myself for living my values in this experience and for seemingly moving through the wheel subconsciously, right? It's the embodiment of the daily rituals that build consistent and powerful magic. And for the East, I reaffirmed two goals. The first is to hold excitement for spiritual places and to hold the reality that not every place that other people love and have beautiful experience in is for me, and vice versa. I also reaffirm that any place, no matter what the aesthetics are of a location, can have a profound and meaningful impact on my life. It's unfair of me to put any expectation or pressure on myself or a place to be life-changing. So with that, I thank you so much for watching Musings and Modalities with me, your pragmatic shaman bestie. Tune in the second and fourth Mondays of each month at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern for more fabulous episodes. I offer free 30-minute consultations if you have additional questions on how I might be able to help you, and if it's a full body yes to work with me. As always, you can book a 60-minute shamanic healing session with me at musingsandmodalities.com. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Musings and Modalities with me, Tristen, your pragmatic shaman bestie. For more powerful healing tools, join me every second and fourth Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. I cover a variety of topics to meet you wherever you are at on your spiritual journey. Learn techniques to work with pendulums, past life healing, astrology, and more. Please share the show and subscribe for more guidance from your pragmatic shaman bestie at musingsandmodalities.com.